She's one of the most photographed, most imitated, most talked about women in history, reduced again and again to one image: the white dress, platinum hair, the breathy voice. But behind that image was a woman who read Joyce for fun, fought her own studio for creative control, and once used her fame to change the course of black jazz legend's career, a story almost nobody tells. This is Marilyn Monroe. She was born Norma Jeane Mortenson in Los Angeles in 1926. Her mother, Gladys, struggled with severe mental illness and was in and out of institutions for most of Norma Jeane's childhood. Her father was never part of her life at all. What followed was a chaotic, unstable upbringing, foster homes, an orphanage, a brief stint living with family friends, with little consistency anywhere. At just 16, she married her first husband, largely to avoid returning to foster care. During World War II, while working in a munitions factory, she was photographed for a military campaign, catching a modeling agency's eye. It was the first domino in a transformation that would eventually take her from Norma Jeane Baker to Marilyn Monroe entirely. 20th Century Fox signed her in 1946, and like so many stars, the studio reshaped her. Her hair was dyed platinum blonde. Her name was changed. Small roles followed for a few years, largely unremarkable, until the early 1950s, when something shifted. By 1953, she was a genuine star: Niagara, then Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, then How to Marry a Millionaire, all released in the same year. She'd become the studio's biggest asset almost overnight, marketed relentlessly as Hollywood's new blonde bombshell. But underneath the marketing, Monroe was quietly serious about her craft in a way the image rarely allowed her to show. She would later train intensively at the Actors Studio under Lee Strasberg, chasing legitimacy as an actress, not just a screen presence. The image, though, is what the world remembers first. The white halter dress billowing over a subway grate in the 7-year itch, 1955. Still one of the most reproduced photographs in film history. Her comedic performances in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and later, Some Like It Hot in 1959, revealed comic timing critics often underestimated because of how she looked. By the mid-1950s, Marilyn Monroe wasn't just an actress. She was arguably the most famous woman on the planet, her name and image inseparable from the very idea of Hollywood glamour itself. But here's a story that rarely makes it into her highlight reel. In 1955, jazz singer Ella Fitzgerald, despite being one of the most talented vocalists in America, was barred from performing at some of Los Angeles' top clubs because of racial discrimination, including the famous Macambo on the Sunset Strip. Marilyn Monroe, a serious jazz fan, personally called the club's owner. She told him that if he booked Ella Fitzgerald, she would sit at a front table every single night. guaranteeing press coverage and star power. He booked her. Ella Fitzgerald later said that single act changed the entire trajectory of her career, opening doors that had been closed to her for years. It's a story that reveals a side of Monroe the dumb blonde image never allowed the public to see. Someone with real taste, real influence, and a willingness to use her fame for someone else's benefit. Her personal life, like her career, was defined by contradiction. She married 3 times. First at 16, then to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio in a marriage that lasted less than a year, and finally to playwright Arthur Miller, a union that placed her, unusually, at the center of America's literary and intellectual world rather than just its entertainment industry. She formed her own production company, Marilyn Monroe Productions, taking on 20th Century Fox over creative control and negotiating a groundbreaking contract with director approval and a larger profit share. By the early 1960s, the pressures were mounting: a demanding filming schedule, chronic insomnia, growing dependence on prescription medication, and a public image she spent over a decade both building and fighting against. On August 5, 1962, Marilyn Monroe was found dead in her Los Angeles home at just 36 years old, ruled a probable suicide from an overdose of barbiturates, though the circumstances have fueled competing theories and public fascination ever since. More than 60 years later, she remains one of the most reproduced, referenced, and reinterpreted figures in modern culture. Andy Warhol silkscreens, countless tribute performances, endless fashion homages. But her real story is more interesting than the icon. A woman who came from nothing, fought a studio system that tried to define her, took her craft seriously even when the world didn't, and quietly used her fame to open a door for someone else when it mattered. She spent a career being reduced to a single image. Her real story was always bigger than that.